Hey, good morning again, everyone. We're starting this brand new series today called You'll Be Glad You Did, where we're going to explore some timeless advice for some troubled times. So over the next 6 weeks, we're going to unpack some stuff that I think that if we apply it and if we act on it, that we'll be glad that we did those things. And the reason we're doing this is because, if you're honest, your story, just like my story, is characterized by a bunch of decisions that you've made that influenced who you are and where you are and the outcome of your life and the trajectory of your life. Because the reality is, in large part, you are who you are today because of the decisions that you made yesterday. Who you are today is influenced and is being controlled by a large part because of those decisions that you made yesterday. And if that's true, what that means is the decisions you make today will impact who you are tomorrow. What you think about today will have an impact on your future. We can't change some of those things in the past, but we can change what we do now looking forward. And I'm sure, just like me, as you look back over the bunch of decisions that you've made in your life, these decisions that have shaped who you are today, have impacted your today and is impacting your future, that there's a whole bunch of decisions that you reflect on and you say different things about them. I'm sure that there's a bunch of decisions that we've made that we are glad we did. As we made those decisions and as we think back to them now, perhaps it fills you with a sense of joy, a sense of well-being. You are glad that you made that decision. Your life is better. Your life has been enriched because of that decision. But on the flip side of the decisions that you're glad you did make, there's a bunch of decisions that you wish you had made. You know, things that you were going to do it, but maybe didn't have the courage or the time or whatever it was. You wish you'd made that decision, but you didn't. And looking back, it's a missed opportunity. Something you could have done that, but something held you back. And you're wishing, if only I could go back and make that choice again. If only I could go back and do that and take that opportunity, things today would be different. So there's a bunch of decisions. We're glad we made them, and there's another bunch of decisions that we didn't make, that we wish we had made. But there's also a bunch of decisions that we're glad we didn't make. I'm sure you can think of things that you were going to do and something stopped you. Maybe you came to your senses. Maybe you realize that this is a mistake if you go through with this, if you say this, or if you buy this, or if you do that, and you're about to do it, and maybe somebody talked you into your senses, or you had a nudge from God or a prompt from God, and you chose not to do it. And looking back, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I didn't make that decision. If I made that decision, if I did that, if I said that, if I went there, I wouldn't be where I am today. But again, on the flip side of the glad we didn't decisions, there are some decisions we've made where we wish we hadn't. Looking back, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I go there? Why did I act in that way? Why did I respond in that way? Why did I do that situation or do those things? And all of this stuff sort of has an impact. All of these decisions that we make, whether we're glad we are or wish we hadn't or whatever it is, we are who we are today because of those decisions that we've made. And we can't change that. But what we can change is think about, what am I going to do now going forward? You know, how am I going to navigate the challenges that life is throwing at me? And we're living in troubled times, and that's what this series is all about. This series is all about helping us navigate through some of these difficult situations, and navigating through some of those challenges that we face, so we can make wise decisions. Because wisdom is a big deal when it comes to what we're talking about, and actually when it comes to faith in Jesus. Wisdom is knowing that our choices impact who we are. Wisdom is knowing that life is connected, that what happens over here or what we do over here has an impact on something over there, that the choices that I make don't just impact myself or my future, it also impacts the people around me. Wise people are able to connect the dots to see that if I do this, then it's going to cause something over here to happen. So we're going to look at some wisdom, and we're going to draw on some ancient principles. These are not wise sayings or wisdom wisdom that we've come up with, or the team that's delivering these messages. These are things that have been there for generations upon generations. But let me just give you an example of wisdom. Wisdom is, don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. There's some wisdom right there. Don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. I didn't come up with this, but it's a phrase that's out there. Don't trade what you want most, where you're heading, where your future is going, for what you're after right in this moment. How often do people do that? How often do we stop? This is what I want most in my life. This is my trajectory. This is my future. These are my ambitions. These are my goals. But then something happens right in the moment, and I think, well, if I do this, because I want that now, we are unable to see that actually that decision is going to have an impact on your trajectory. It's going to have an impact on where you're going. Don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. How many marriages fail because of this? How many marriages fail because somebody trades what they want most for something that they want in that moment? How many careers fail or come unstuck because somebody trades what they want most for something that comes around, an opportunity that comes there in that instant, and they make a decision, and then years down or even minutes later, are like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. The thing about this is there's no law against this. You can do this. You can trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. There's nobody to stop you doing that. There's no law. It's not even unethical, depending on what it is that you want most in the moment. Now, there's some of those stuff in there. But the thing about this decision or this statement is that choosing not to do this is unwise. It's a bad idea that we can see that when we trade what we want most for what we want in the moment, it's going to cause a chain reaction that actually will leave us left with this thing that none of us want. Will leave us left with regret. And here's some wisdom related to regret. Our greatest regrets are often preceded by a series of unwise decisions. Our greatest regrets are often preceded by a series of unwise decisions. So let me ask you this question. Are you making any unwise decisions in any aspect of your life right now? Maybe when it comes to your relationships or your finances or your career or your health or your faith. Are you making some unwise decisions in any aspect of your life? Because if you are, I can predict your future for you. If you're making unwise decisions right now in these aspects of your life, I can tell you, I can predict that regret is in your future. It's just a way. Everybody can see it happening. When we make a bunch of unwise decisions, what's bound to happen somewhere along the line, sooner or later, is that we make a decision that, looking back, we wish we hadn't, and we're left with regret. This series is all about helping us live wisely and navigating some of those things. This series is about helping us ask this question, what is the wise thing for me to do? In any situation, in any circumstance, what's the wise thing for me to do? And the reason we're talking about this here is because Jesus connected following him with a life that is characterized by wisdom. That Jesus talks a lot about living a wise life. Jesus talks a lot about making wise decisions and being aware that what you do over here has an impact on what happens over here. Jesus talks a lot about saying, what you say over here has an impact on what happens over here, not just in your life, but in the lives of the people around you. And so we're going to explore this for 6 weeks, and how you engage with all this stuff is up to you, and it depends really where you are on this journey of faith. If you're someone who's not sure what you think or what you believe, you're just starting out on your journey of faith, and you're trying to piece those things together, trying to figure out, well, is Jesus who he claims to be? Then there's a bunch of stuff in here that's going to be practical and helpful. You don't have to do that, the stuff that we talk about, but as you look at it and as you engage with it, hopefully you'll see, well, that's wise. If I do that, my life will be better. If I do that, it will help me in the future. There'll be a bunch of stuff that fits into that category. And if that's you, if you're still figuring out your way on this whole faith thing, you get to pick and choose. You get to say, yeah, I'm gonna lean into that, and I'm gonna try that, and hopefully that'll be something that when you do that, you're glad that you did, that you see the benefit and the knock-on impact. But if you're a Jesus follower, if you're somebody who's made that decision to live your life as Jesus would if he was in your shoes, if you've dedicated your life to following Jesus, well, this is part and parcel of what it is that you signed up for. Jesus expects you to do this. It's part of what he says when he invited you to follow him. He said, I want you to learn from me. I want you to listen to me. I want you to follow me. I want you to apply the things that I have for you. So, wherever you are on this journey of faith depends on how you relate to this stuff. If you're at this stage, if you're a Jesus follower, well, Jesus compels you to say that I want you to do these things. I expect you to do these things. And we're going to take a look at something Jesus said in this famous sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. It's recorded for us in Matthew's Gospel and in Luke's Gospel. And it was sort of like, Matthew records this big, long message for a couple of chapters, I think chapter 5 right through to the end of chapter 7. And he's talking about a whole bunch of things about how to live your life in a way that would bring glory and honor to God. How to live your life in a way that would bless and encourage the people around you. And as you read through the Sermon on the Mount, there's loads of these sort of wise sayings or these wise applicable things that Jesus is talking about. I want you to do this and I don't want you to do that. And we think, that this was sort of like Jesus' go-to message. Matthew records it as one big chunk. Luke has it split up in different sections across his gospel. And the reason for that is probably at times Jesus delivered it as one big massive message, one big sermon, and at other times Jesus just shared sound bites or bits from it depending on where he was or who he was with. These are his things that he just went to over and over again. He repeated himself over and over again. These are the things that are so important. These are the things that I want you to do. And right at the end of this amazing sermon in Matthew's Gospel where he's talked about all this stuff, and I really encourage you, go home and pick up a Bible and we'll download it on your phone and read through the whole thing in one go. And he says so much amazing stuff. But right at the end of that message, he closes with a famous parable that if you've never been in church before, chances are you know something of this parable. You might not even know that it came from the Bible that Jesus said it. But this is what Jesus says. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, and that's all of the stuff that he's just said in this sermon, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man. What Jesus is saying, if you act on what I've said, then you'll be wise. And he goes on to share this parable, this famous parable, that shows us that life is connected, that shows us that our choices that we make today impact our future. And I'm sure this is familiar to you. He goes on, you're like a wise man who built his house on the rock. You might, if you're of a certain age, you might have sung a song about this in primary school. Jesus is saying, if you hear my words and if you apply them, you're like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. You see, building on the rock was costly. Building on the rock was time-consuming, but it was a decision that you make now with a future in mind. What you want most when you're building a house is for a house that was going to last for a long period of time. So building on the rock is a wise decision to make because, well, as he goes on, the rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. The rain came down and the floods went up. The rain came down and no, okay, you're not with me. But the house on the rock stood firm. Why? Well, because it was built on the rock. That when the inevitable rain and the winds came, it had a strong foundation upon which to build. Jesus is saying, if you apply what I've said, if you put into practice the things that I've said to you, if you hear these words of mine and you act on them, that's a decision you're making now that will benefit you and bless you in the future. That's a decision you'll make now that looking back in years to come, you are glad that you did. The house didn't fall, even though, because it was built on the rock and it was more difficult, it was more expensive, it cost, it was more timely, took longer to do, but it was a wise decision. But there's always a but. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man. If you're in the crowd and you're listening to Jesus and then he said these things and he's saying, look, if you're listening to me and you don't do what I'm asking you, you don't apply what I'm saying, well, you're foolish. You're a fool. You know, we're not in the crowd. We weren't there when Jesus delivered that famous sermon. We weren't with the other people when Jesus taught bits of this Sermon on the Mount. But many of us have read them. Many of us have heard of them. Many of us have encountered them. And Jesus is saying, you know, if you've heard these words, if you've read these words, if you've listened to these words and you don't put them into practice, well, you're like a foolish man. You know, according to Jesus, a fool is somebody who lives their life without the recognition that what you do today impacts what happens tomorrow. You know, a fool is somebody who doesn't see that life is connected. You know, a fool is somebody who trades what they want most for what they want in the moment. And thinking like that and living like that rarely, if ever, ends well. You know, the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Jesus is saying, you know, if you hear these words and you don't apply them, you're like a foolish man, a foolish guy who doesn't build his house on the rock, who builds his house on the sand. And what Jesus is talking about here is he's actually talking about building your house on like a dry riverbed, like a wadi at the bottom of a canyon. See, the geography, the topography of Galilee where Jesus lived was strange, or is strange. You know, Galilee is really low, so the Dead Sea, which is near to Galilee, is like the lowest place on earth, is 431 meters below sea level. Yet Jerusalem, which isn't far away from Galilee, sits on almost the top of a mountain. It's like 740 meters above sea level. So there's this big, vast height difference. And what would happen, and it's dry and it's arid, and the rains would fall on the mountains and it would rush down the sides of the hills, and it would create these sort of like caverns, these valleys that just run all the way through it, and the rains would pour down on the mountains, rush down through these valleys. And if you built your house on the bottom of this valley, well, this river, this torrent would come sweeping through, and whatever was there is not going to stand against it. If you go there, you can see like these big, massive canyons, these big valleys that have been forged and carved in. And because of the change in altitude and the humidity and all of that sort of stuff, the weather's unpredictable. It means that storms can roll in really quickly without you even recognizing it or realizing it. One moment it's a bright sunny day, and then all of a sudden a flash flood comes because of the rains that are poured down in the mountains in Jerusalem or that area, and just rushing down through the valleys down into Galilee. And Jesus is saying, look, you know, if you've heard these words of mine and you're not applying them, you're not living them out, well, you're like somebody who's going to build their house on the bottom of this valley. Perhaps he was standing around there at times as he said that. And people can see down there, and they can see sort of the dry riverbed, and they're like, who would ever build their house down there? Well, Jesus says a fool would build their house down there. Because what's going to happen? You know, the rain will come down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Why did it fall with a great crash? Because it was built on sand. It's got no foundation. Yeah, it might be easier because you haven't got to drill into the rock or beat into the rock. You can just place it there, and you can be done and move in. But as soon as the inevitable storm of life comes, when it hits, it's going to hit hard, and that house is going to fall with a crash, with a great crash. You know, and Jesus says the alternative is to not build it on the valley floor, but to build it up high on the canyon's edge, on the rock, on the canyon. And everyone's like, yeah, of course. You know, we know that, Jesus. You know, we've been building houses here for a long time. Nobody would build their house on the bottom of the valley. Everybody builds it up high on the canyon's edge. But of course, Jesus isn't talking about building houses. He's talking about building lives. He's saying, you know, don't build your house, don't build your life on the sand. Don't build your life on the easy thing. Don't take the shortcut or those sort of things. You know, actually do something that's a little bit more difficult now, but because you know it will benefit you in the future. Jesus is saying, don't build your life on anything. Build your life on a firm foundation. And by the way, if you're not sure what the firm foundation is, I'm the firm foundation. All of this stuff that I've said is the firm foundation upon which I want you to build your life. Because the thing about Jesus and what he said is this work? Yeah, Jesus taught for our benefit, not our detriment. the things that Jesus said, and as you look through the Sermon on the Mount, all of the things that Jesus is teaching there is actually to bless us and to help us and encourage us, to make us better at our lives, to help us be better in our relationships and with our finances and in our health and in our faith. Jesus taught for our benefit, not for our detriment. Jesus wanted something for us, not something from us. And he's saying that if you put these words of mine into practice, well, you'll be wise. There's wisdom in that. If you put these words of mine into practice, you will benefit, but so will the people around you, the people you care about, and the people that you love. They will benefit. And I imagine the crowd, as Jesus is saying that, are nodding their head, saying, yeah, we know, Jesus. We know, yeah, we know. Maybe even people say, you don't need to tell me, we know. But I'm sure one thing that you know that I know is that there is a vast difference between knowing and doing. It's one thing to know something, it's completely different to do it. Knowing and doing takes us to two very different places. If you are a parent, if you've ever parented teenagers, I'm sure you've had a similar conversation to the one that I've had many times, and I'm pretty sure it's a conversation that my parents had with me many times. Is you might be saying you need to do your homework or tidy your room or whatever it is, and the response you get is something along the lines of, I know, you don't need to tell me. I know. And I say to my son Malachi often, Malachi, there's a difference between knowing and doing. And I hear my parents in me as I say that. Have you ever had that experience? You start saying the things that your parents said to you, and you're, I get it. Maybe phone, Mum, I'm really sorry. I remember that. I know, you don't need to tell me. And the assumption is that, since I know, I'll do. But that's not true. Knowing and doing are two very different things. And Jesus is standing there and he's saying all this stuff to people. And I'm sure they're nodding their heads. Yeah, Jesus, we know you've said this. Oh, I was there last week when you said this to the people over there. Jesus, I know this. Will you tell me something different? I've heard this so many times. The disciples, Peter maybe is there and he's like, oh, he's doing that one again. The story, and maybe they're mithing along with the parable of the guy building his house. He's always doing that bit, and who's ever going to build the house on the bottom of a valley floor? We know, Jesus. You don't need to tell us, Jesus. But there's a vast difference between knowing and doing. Jesus is saying just because you know something doesn't mean that you're going to apply it. Just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to put it into practice. And if you know something and you don't do it, well, according to Jesus, you're a fool. If you know and you do it, you're wise. If you hear these things and you put it into practice, yeah, I know. I'm going to do that. I'm going to act on it. I'm going to go there. I'm going to say that. I'm going to make an amends there. Well, that's wisdom because the decision I'm making now is going to impact my future. But if we don't do that, if we know these things and we choose to ignore that, we choose not to do it, we choose not to apply it, well, we're a fool. What has Jesus said that he said, but you just haven't done? What has Jesus said or challenged you on that you know? You know. You don't need him to tell you again. You don't need that nudge again because you know. You know what you're saying is wrong. You know what you're doing is wrong. Or you know that you're not doing something that actually you should do. You know, but you're not doing. What is it that he said that you know, but you just aren't doing? Let's zoom out as you look at your whole life. What do you know you need to do, but you just aren't doing? It might be a faith thing, but it might be a life thing, and the two aren't separate. The two are joined. What do you know you need to do, but for whatever reason, you just aren't doing it? When it comes to your relationships or your finances or your career or your help or your faith, what do you know that you need to do, but you're just not doing it? For me, when it comes to my health, I know I need to exercise more and eat less. I know it. You don't need to stop it. You don't need to tell me. But do I do it? Sometimes. But sometimes when the alarm goes off and I think I need to get out of bed and go for a run, I'll stay a little bit longer and then I'll have some really nice bacon and egg sandwich for breakfast instead. That's what I end up doing. I know what I need to do. And what I want most is I want to be fit and healthy. I want to be able to live long into the future. I want to be healthy when I'm a lot older than I am now. But often in that moment when the alarm goes off and it's cold, what I want most is traded for what I want in the moment. Now, that's a flippant example, but where else do we do this in life? I've heard so many stories of people whose marriages have failed because what they wanted most was traded for what they wanted in that instant. See, when people get married, nobody sort of, when they get married, set off to say, well, I want this to end in disaster. You know, when we get married, we want to stay happily married for the rest of our lives. That's what we want most. But then there's that attraction or that interest. Maybe a spark happens between another person. Somebody shows you a little bit more interest, a friend or a colleague or a complete stranger. And what you want most is over there, but you trade that for something exciting and something new and something different that's happening in the moment. How many marriages have failed because somebody traded what they want? They know, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't stay. I shouldn't have one more drink. I shouldn't be here on my own. I know, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what I shouldn't do. How many careers have been ruined? You know, what you want most is to be successful and to build a career and to be reputable. But then there's that opportunity for you to get there quicker, that shortcut, that backhander, to do that thing which you know you shouldn't do, but nobody will know. Nobody will see. And you trade what you want most for what you want now. In every aspect of our lives, we do this. What is it that you know you need to do, but for whatever reason, you're just not doing it? And when we're doing this, when we're walking down this path, you know, we want this, but we're trading it for here, everybody around us can see it. Everybody, apart from us, can see it coming. And if we would just listen to their advice, we'd hear them saying, stop being a fool. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Again, how many stories of disaster have happened? And there's been people around who are saying, we could see it coming all along, and they just couldn't see it. You know, they were a complete fool. You know, Jesus has invited us, and his invitation to us didn't stop at learn from me. You know, Jesus, when he invited us, it didn't stop at learn from me. It flowed into follow me. Hear these words of mine and put them into practice. You know, the challenge is to apply what Jesus has said. The challenge is for us to put these things into practice. And that's difficult and that's challenging because what I want most is this dream, this vision that I have, but the temptation to do what I want in the moment is so strong. You know, to apply what Jesus has said is so challenging and so difficult that, you know, yeah, I've heard what you've said and I know Jesus, but it's quite difficult for me to do those things. The great thing is that with this challenge comes an offer of help. We're going to get the band back up as we just wrap up our time together. See, Jesus has said, I want you to hear these words of mine, and I want you to apply them. I want you to put them into practice. But I'm here to help you do that. If you follow Jesus, he's promised you the gift of his Spirit to be at work within you. Now, this I know sounds strange and it sounds confusing, but the same Spirit that was at work within the life of Jesus, the same Spirit that enabled Jesus to do all the things that Jesus was able to do, is at work within you. If you follow him, if you've heard the words of Jesus and are willing to put them into practice, the same Spirit that enabled Jesus to do all that he could do is being given to you. And Jesus said, you see all the stuff that I've done? You know, talking to his disciples about the promise of the gift of his Spirit. See all the stuff that I've done? Do you know what? You're going to do the same things. In fact, Jesus says, get your head around this. In fact, you will do greater things than these because I'm going to be with my Father and I'm going to send you my Spirit, my comforter, my helper to be with you and to support you. The promise that Jesus says, if you learn from me and you follow me, is you'll do what I've done. In fact, you'll do greater things than these. Not because you're great, not because you're special, not because you're talented or amazing, but because that amazing gift of his Spirit is at work in you and through you. And somehow we need to learn, how do we walk in step with him? How do we walk in step with the promise of his Spirit to actually do those things that he said to us, those nudges that he says, look, don't do that. Don't go there. Don't say that. Don't respond in that way. Or, look, I want you to do this. I want you to have the courage to walk across the room. I want you to have the courage to pick up the phone. I want you to have the courage to get on a plane. I want you to have the courage to do something different. And I'm going to help you. My Spirit is at work within you to help you apply what he has said. And that's the amazing thing, that there's the challenge, and it's a big challenge, but I'm not leaving you on your own. I want to help you do this. So what is it you need to do that you know you need to do, but for whatever reason you're just not doing it? What is it you need to start doing? What is it you need to stop doing it? What relationship do you need to end? What relationship do you need to reconcile, or at least try to reconcile? What is it that you know you need to do, but for whatever reason you've just not done it? Let me give you some advice. Whatever it is that you need to do, and you just haven't done it, do it today. You'll be glad you did. Why don't you stand with me? What is it that you know you need to do, and you've just not done it? What is it that's holding you back from taking that step? Whatever it is. Maybe it's to do with following Jesus and applying some of these things. Maybe it's, joining a volunteer team or a connect group or sharing your faith with somebody. Maybe it's to start giving or embracing disciplines. Maybe it's to get out of bed earlier and to spend time praying and reading your Bible before you get about your day. But maybe it's a whole bunch of stuff. It could be to do with a relationship or career or health, anything. What is it that you know you need to do, but you just haven't done it? Jesus says, learn from me and follow me. And I believe that he wants to help you take that step and do that thing that when you look back, you'll be glad you did. Perhaps you've got something in your mind, and if you want Jesus to help you with that, why don't you just say this prayer along with me, and maybe you want to just hold your hands out in front of you as a symbol that you want to receive blessing and help from God. Father God, we thank you for the wisdom of Jesus. Thank you that he taught like nobody else ever did. And thank you that we had these words protected for us, preserved for us, that we can benefit from this wisdom. And Lord, I pray that you'd help us apply what he said, to act on what he said, to do what he said. And for these things that we know, Lord, that we need to do, these relationships that we know we need to fix or that we need to end, these choices that we know we need to make, these challenges that we have to overcome. Lord, I pray that you'd help us take that step, to have the courage that comes from your Spirit at work within us. Lord, perhaps it's that decision to follow you for the first time, to stop trying to be in control of our lives and living for ourselves. Perhaps we feel that nudge from you to trust you and to let go. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to take that step, to follow you, to apply what it is that you're nudging us in. And as we do that, Lord, I pray that we'll be glad we did. That as we look back, we'll see that it will benefit us, but it also benefit the people around us. Give us courage to trust you and to follow you.